I stood still, dust streaking my faded shirt, hands open and visible, breath slow and controlled. I clocked the missing body cam, the deputy blocking the driveway, the evidence that appeared where it had not been seconds earlier. To them, I was just a fat black farmer who would not swing back. They had no idea they were cornering a man trained to endure humiliation, catalog threats, and decide exactly when to move. Sheriff Vance Calder's boots scraped the dirt inches from my hand as his deputies laughed and closed ranks around me. "Look at you," he said loudly, savoring every word. "Big, slow, and hiding behind cows like that makes you harmless. Men like you always think land papers matter. This farm is done. You are done." As dawn crept over my farm like a hesitant visitor, the fog hung low and thick between the fence posts. The heavy moisture made my work clothes stick to my skin as I moved through my morning routine. Each step was deliberate and unhurried, the same path I had walked 1,000 mornings before. The goats crowded around me, their hooves making soft thuds against the worn boards of their pen. I reached down to scratch behind old Betty's ears, my large hands gentle despite their strength. "Easy now," I murmured, portioning out feed with practiced efficiency. "Everybody gets their share." A flash of movement caught my eye, a dark county SUV crawling past my gate. I kept feeding, my movements unchanged, but my eyes tracked the vehicle as it passed. Minutes later it rolled by again, slower this time. The driver's face was hidden behind tinted glass, yet I felt the weight of their stare. I waited until the SUV disappeared around the bend before setting down my feed bucket. Something was not right. The air felt charged with intention that made the hair on my neck stand up. Moving with purpose now, I began walking my property line, checking each fence post and marker. That is when I saw them. Fresh wooden stakes hammered into the ground, bright orange plastic ribbons fluttering in the morning breeze. They were at least 10 feet inside my property line. I knelt down, my knees creaking slightly, and ran my fingers over the splintered top of one stake. The wood was fresh and raw. This had been done overnight. Across the road, Marlene Hayes stood on her porch, a steaming coffee mug in her weathered hands. Her eyes were sharp despite the early hour, concern evident in the tight line of her mouth. "Those were not there yesterday evening," she called out. "No, ma'am, they were not," I replied, pulling out my phone. I took careful photos of each stake, making sure to capture their position relative to my existing boundary markers. My hands remained steady as I documented everything, the angle of the stakes, the boot prints in the soft earth around them, even the way the ribbons pointed toward my barn. Inside my house, I sat at the kitchen table and dialed the county assessor's office. "County assessor's office," a bored voice answered. "This is Harlan Voss out on Route 7, I said, keeping my voice level. "I found survey stakes on my property that I did not authorize. I need to know who placed them and why." A long pause followed, filled with the sound of clicking keyboards. "I do not see any scheduled surveys for that area, Mr. Voss." "These stakes are inside my property line," I pressed. "Someone came onto my land without permission." "We will have to look into it," the voice replied, dismissive. "Now fill out a form on our website and someone will get back to you." The line went dead. I set my phone down carefully, studying the way morning light played across its screen. The message was clear enough. Nobody was going to help me figure this out. I stood up, my chair scraping against the worn linoleum, and headed back outside. The fog was starting to lift, revealing fresh tire tracks I had not noticed earlier. They cut through the wet grass near my barn, the pattern familiar, the same tread as the county SUV that had passed by. I followed them, finding more boot prints leading toward my milk house. The marks were deliberate and purposeful. Someone had been doing more than just placing survey stakes. I did not say anything to my animals as I finished my morning checks, but they seemed to sense my unease. The goats stayed closer than usual, and even the usually standoffish barn cat wound around my ankles. I moved through my routine with careful attention, noting every detail that seemed out of place. At the main gate, I double-checked the chain, making sure it was properly secured. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, charged and ready, filled with photos that might mean nothing or everything. The morning sun was starting to burn off the last wisps of fog when I heard it. Sirens in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. I stood my ground as the sound grew closer, the wail bouncing off the hills surrounding my farm. They were coming fast, heading straight for my driveway. Multiple vehicles, by the sound of it, bearing down on my property with urgent purpose. My hands stayed loose at my sides, my breathing steady despite the approaching chaos. The animals had gone quiet, sensing the change in the air. Gravel crunched under heavy tires as 3 patrol cars and a county truck swung into my driveway. The vehicles fanned out in a practiced formation, blocking both my barn entrance and the main gate. The morning sun glinted off their windshields, harsh and bright against the peaceful farmland. Sheriff Vance Calder stepped out first, adjusting his hat with theatrical slowness. His smile did not reach his eyes as he surveyed my property like a man already counting what he could take. Deputy Jax Landry emerged next, practically bouncing on his feet, eager as a guard dog straining at its leash. 3 more deputies spread out behind them, hands resting casually on their belts. Brrr. "Morning, Mr. Voss," Calder called out, his voice carrying across the yard with practiced authority. "Got some matters we need to discuss." I stood my ground near the barn door, watching them approach. My goats had gone quiet in their pen, huddled together away from the commotion. Even the chickens had stopped their morning pecking, sensing the tension in the air. "Sheriff," I replied evenly. "What brings you out here?" Calder held up a paper, waving it like a flag. "Emergency search authorization. Got some concerning reports about this property we need to look into." "What kind of reports?" My voice remained calm, though my eyes caught every detail. The way Landry kept shifting position to stay in my blind spot. How 2 deputies were conspicuously missing their body cams. "Anonymous tips," Calder said, still smiling. "Stolen farm equipment, unlicensed sales, illegal livestock operations. You know how it is. Concerned citizens doing their civic duty." Landry stepped closer, invading my personal space. His breath smelled of coffee and satisfaction. "Bet we find all kinds of interesting things, won't we, boy?" I did not flinch at the deliberately inflammatory word. "I would like to see that authorization," I said, addressing Calder. "And I will need all your badge numbers for my records." The smile dropped from Calder's face. Landry moved like he had been waiting for permission, grabbing my arm and spinning me around with unnecessary force. "On the ground!" he barked, kicking at the back of my knees. Now I could have resisted. My muscles knew exactly how to counter the hold, but I let myself be driven down, my face pressed into the dirt near my own barn door. The ground was still damp from morning dew, soaking into my shirt. "There we go," Landry laughed, grinding his knee into my back. "Not so big now, are you?" Calder's boots appeared in my limited field of vision. "We are just doing our job here, Mr. Voss, keeping the county safe," his voice projected outward, playing to an audience I could not see from my position. "Cannot have people thinking they are above the law." The other deputies fanned out across my property. I tracked their movements by sound, boots stomping through my vegetable garden, the crash of feed bins being knocked over, my animals bleeding in distress as gates were rattled and doors slammed. "Check everything," Calder called out. "These types always think they can hide things in plain sight." I focused on my breathing, keeping it steady and controlled. I mentally recorded every detail, which deputies were filming and which were not. The way Landry's hand shook slightly with excitement as he maintained the hold, the specific pattern of mud on Calder's boots, the same tread I had seen earlier near my milk house. "Sir, this door is locked," a deputy called from the storage shed. "Well, unlock it," Calder replied as if it were obvious. The sound of metal breaking followed, my padlock being cut. Through it all, I remained still, my face pressed into my own soil. I heard my hens scattering in panic, smelled motor oil from the county truck, felt the vibration of heavy boots moving past me toward the milk house. "Nothing in the feed room," someone reported, moving to the tool area. Landry leaned down, his mouth close to my ear. "Awful quiet for an innocent man. Got nothing to say?" "My lawyer will do the talking," I replied softly, which earned me a harder press of the knee. A deputy emerged from the barn holding up a set of bills. "Found these hidden behind some equipment. A lot of cash for a small-time farmer." "That is from the farmer's market," I said. "I have receipts." "Shut it!" Landry snapped, jerking my arms higher. Through the gap under the barn door, I watched boots moving near my tool bench. A hand dropped something small in plastic, deliberately and carefully. The same boots shifted, then stepped back. "Sheriff," the deputy called out. "Got something here?" Well, well, the deputy said, bending down to retrieve what he had just planted. Look what we found. A small bag dangled from his fingers, his grin visible even from my limited perspective. The deputy's face showed no shame, no hesitation, just the satisfied look of a man who had done this before and expected to do it again. A cloud of dust rose from the road shoulder as a weathered blue sedan screeched to a halt. Sierra Vale burst out, her press badge swinging from her neck, phone already raised and recording. Her dark hair was coming loose from its braid as she jogged toward the farm entrance, narrating in a clear, steady voice. I am live at the Voss family farm, where what appears to be an unauthorized police raid is in progress, she announced, keeping her camera focused on the cluster of patrol cars. Multiple deputies on scene, no warrant visible. And she zoomed in on me, still pinned to the ground. What looks like excessive force being used on the property owner. Calder's head snapped up at her voice. His entire demeanor shifted like a switch had been flipped. The predatory stance softened into something more camera-friendly. He adjusted his belt, smoothed his uniform, and turned to face Sierra with a practiced smile. Miss Vale, he called out, spreading his hands in a welcoming gesture. Always a pleasure to have our local media taking an interest in law enforcement operations. Sheriff, can you explain why Mr. Voss is being held down when he appears to be cooperating? Sierra kept her phone steady, documenting everything. And could you show us the warrant for this search? Landry's knee remained firmly planted in my back, but his aggressive expression had turned uncertain, eyes darting between Sierra's camera and Calder for guidance. Now, Miss Vale, Calder's voice dripped with manufactured patience. We are conducting a legitimate investigation based on multiple community complaints. We have proper authorization. That is not the same as a warrant, Sierra interrupted, stepping closer. Her camera captured deputies emerging from the barn with armfuls of my paperwork. Are those private documents being seized without a court order? More vehicles were stopping along the road. Now, neighbors emerged, gathering in small clusters. Marlene Hayes stood at the front of the growing crowd, her arms crossed tight over her chest. The whispers grew louder. What are they doing to Harlan? Ain't right. All these cops. Someone ought to call somebody. Calder maintained his camera-ready smile, but his eyes had gone cold. We are simply following procedure here, folks. Nothing to be concerned about. I noticed the change in pressure from Landry's knee, slightly lighter now that witnesses were recording. I kept my breathing steady, watching and waiting. Sierra panned her camera across the scene, narrating each detail. Deputies are searching buildings without showing cause. Animals appear distressed. Mr. Voss is still being held down despite no visible resistance. I count at least 2 deputies without active body cams. Her live stream stuttered suddenly, the image freezing for several seconds before resuming with degraded quality. Sierra frowned at her phone, tapping the screen. Having some technical difficulties, she reported, but we are still... The video froze again, longer this time. Calder's friendly mask slipped a fraction. He stepped toward Sierra, positioning himself between her camera and the deputies searching the milk house. Miss Vale, you are approaching an active law enforcement operation. Could be dangerous. Would not want you to get hurt. The threat hung in the air, wrapped in a thin veneer of concern. I noticed movement by the county truck, a deputy adjusting something inside the cab. The low electronic hum grew more pronounced. I am well within my rights to record, Sierra insisted, but her voice betrayed frustration as her stream continued to glitch. The public has a right to see. Rights? Landry barked out a laugh, his knee driving hard into my back again now that the video was unstable. You are interfering with a police action, girl. That is a crime. The live stream's quality deteriorated further, breaking into pixelated chunks. Sierra backed up a few steps, trying to find better signal. Something is wrong with the connection. Must be these rural areas, Calder said with exaggerated sympathy. Poor coverage out here. But I had seen the pattern. Every time Sierra's stream stabilized, the hum from the truck would spike, and the video would fail seconds later. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. The gathered crowd grew restless as the live stream continued to malfunction. Some raised their own phones, but their recordings seemed to suffer similar issues. Marlene Hayes stepped forward, her voice carrying across the yard. We are all watching, Vance. All of us. Calder's smile turned sharp. Then you will all see we are just doing our jobs. He nodded to Landry. Deputy, secure that phone. Cannot have her endangering herself or our operation. Landry released his hold on me and lunged for Sierra's phone. She tried to step back, clutching it tighter, but Landry grabbed her wrist. "That is police evidence now," he sneered, twisting until her fingers opened. The phone clattered to the ground. Landry snatched it up, holding it overhead like a trophy, while Sierra rubbed her wrist. The growing crowd on the road erupted in angry murmurs. "Just keeping everyone safe," Calder announced loudly, still performing for his audience. But his eyes were cold and satisfied as the last connection to the outside world went dark in Landry's grip. The electronic hum from the truck continued its steady drone, and in the sudden silence of the killed live stream, the sound of deputies ransacking my farm seemed to grow louder, more deliberate, more bold. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Marlene Hayes strode across my yard, her sensible shoes kicking up dust with each determined step. A thick manila folder was clutched to her chest like armor, her silver hair gleaming in the harsh light. The crowd at the road parted to let her through, their whispers following her movement. "Vance Calder," her voice cracked across the yard like summer lightning. "I've got some interesting reading material here you might want to see." Calder turned slowly, his practiced smile flickering as he recognized the former school secretary. Marlene had spent 30 years keeping records for the county, and everyone knew she had not stopped just because she had retired. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, smoothing his voice into honey, "this is a police operation. You need to stay back with the others." "Police operation?" Marlene snorted, flipping open her folder. "More like a land grab, just like the Johnston place last spring and the Rodriguez farm before that." She pulled out a sheet covered in neat columns. "Funny how it always starts the same way. Surprise inspections, mysterious complaints, evidence that appears out of nowhere." Landry stepped forward, using his bulk to loom over the smaller woman. "Ma'am, you are interfering with—" "I am reading public records, Deputy." Marlene cut him off, not backing down an inch. She held up another paper. "Like these property transfers. Every seized farm sold at auction for pennies on the dollar. And look who keeps buying through shell companies. Bryce Kane Development." She jabbed a finger at the survey stakes. "Same company that just filed new permits for this exact acreage." I watched the exchange carefully, noting how Calder's jaw tightened at the mention of Bryce Kane. The pieces were falling into place, the stakes, the raids, the planted evidence. This was not about drugs or stolen equipment. This was about my land. "Mrs. Hayes," Calder said, voice hardening, "you are working yourself up over nothing. We received credible reports." "Anonymous tips just like always," Marlene interrupted. "Right before the surveys show up, right before the raids start." She pulled out more papers. "I've got dates, times, license plates of county vehicles driving past targeted properties, patterns of harassment that somehow never make it into official reports." Landry moved closer, deliberately invading her space. His hand rested meaningfully on his belt. "That sounds like accusations against law enforcement, ma'am. Could be considered slander." I saw the threat in Landry's stance. Without making sudden movements, I stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Marlene's shoulder, guiding her back a step. My bulk naturally inserted itself between her and the deputy. "The records speak for themselves," Marlene continued, though she allowed me to position her at a safer distance. "Public documents, all of them, including the new survey permits that somehow got approved before anyone notified the property owner." At the edge of the scene, Sierra was still arguing with the deputy holding her phone. "That is personal property containing evidence of police misconduct," she insisted. "You have no right to—" "One more word about rights," Landry called over to her, "and you will be riding to the station in cuffs. Obstruction is a serious charge, girl." "So is tampering with evidence," Sierra shot back, "like that signal jammer in the county truck." Calder's friendly mask dropped completely. "Deputy Landry, secure that phone as evidence. Miss Vale can file a formal request to retrieve any personal items not related to our investigation." He turned back to address the growing crowd, raising his voice to carry. "Folks, we have discovered illegal substances on the premises." He held up the planted baggie of pills. "Given the severity of these findings, we are implementing emergency protocols. County Animal Control will be taking temporary custody of all livestock for their safety and the public good." I felt my chest tighten. The animals were my livelihood, my goats, my chickens, the cattle I had bred carefully over years. Taking them would break the farm, guilty verdict or not. You cannot just— Sierra started to protest. We can, and we will, Calder interrupted. We have probable cause of criminal activity. That gives us broad authority to secure the property and any assets that could be related to illegal operations. The crowd shifted uneasily. A few people drifted back toward their cars, not wanting to be associated with trouble. Others looked away when I glanced in their direction. The message was clear. They might disapprove, but they would not stick their necks out. Marlene clutched her folder tighter. This is robbery with a badge, Vance, and you know it. This, Calder replied, pulling a fresh paper from his pocket, is a notice of criminal charges. He slapped it against my chest with unnecessary force. Possession of controlled substances, resisting inspection, interfering with law enforcement. County officers will be stationed here starting tonight to secure the premises and prevent evidence tampering. I took the paper without changing expression, though inside my mind was racing. They were not just trying to arrest me or seize my animals. They were setting up to take everything while I was tied up in court, unable to fight back. The raid was not the end. It was just the beginning. The sun hung low and angry on the horizon as the last patrol car pulled away from my farm, leaving behind upturned feed bins, scattered papers, and frightened animals. The dust from their departure had not even settled before I began a careful sweep of my property, photographing every bit of damage with mechanical precision. My movements were controlled, but my eyes missed nothing. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Marlene Hayes settled at the worn wooden table, spreading her documents across its surface like battle plans. Sierra paced nearby, scribbling furiously in a spiral notebook she had borrowed after they had taken her phone. Write down everything you saw, Marlene instructed, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. Times, faces, exact words if you can remember them. Especially that deputy who planted the evidence. Sierra's pen flew across the page. The way Landry moved, he knew exactly where to put that bag, like they had planned it. They did plan it, Marlene said, sorting through her papers, just like they planned the timing of those survey stakes. She checked her watch and wrote the time next to a fresh entry. 3 raids in 6 months, all following the same pattern. I entered through the screen door, my boots carefully wiped clean. Without speaking, I filled my ancient coffee maker and set it brewing. The familiar scent filled the kitchen, pushing back against the lingering worry that hung in the air. How bad? Marlene asked, watching me. Feed scattered, storage bins knocked over, animals spooked but not hurt. My voice remained level and factual. They broke the east barn latch, made it look accidental. Sierra looked up from her notes. They will say you did it yourself. Try to claim you were destroying evidence or something. I nodded once. Already photographed it, time-stamped. I moved to my mailbox by the door, sorting through the day's delivery with careful hands. Near the bottom of the stack, a heavy cream-colored envelope bore a federal seal. My expression did not change as I opened it, but my shoulders tensed slightly as I read. The letter was brief and official. It connected my name to an operation from my past, one that was supposed to stay buried in classified files. The message was not a threat exactly, but the implications were clear. My history could become a weapon against me if the wrong people started digging. They will try to make me the villain, I said finally, folding the letter with precise creases. I did not elaborate further, but the weight of unspoken words filled the kitchen. Outside, the day's heat began to fade. Long shadows stretched across the yard as I checked each animal pen, counting heads, ensuring water troughs were full. My movements were unhurried but purposeful, a man preparing for a siege. Marlene organized her documents into clear plastic sleeves, each page protected and numbered. We need copies, she said. Multiple sets, different locations. They will try to discredit everything we have. And we need eyes on the property, Sierra added, flipping to a fresh page in her notebook. They took my phone, but I can borrow equipment, set up cameras. The sweep of headlights across the kitchen window cut her off. A patrol car crawled past the property line, moving slower than necessary. Its tires crunched on gravel as it paused at the gate. I watched through the window, my bulk casting a shadow across the floor. They will not wait long, I said quietly. Pressure starts now. Moving with deliberate calm, I gathered my tools and headed to the broken barn latch. The patrol car idled at the gate, its presence heavy in the growing darkness. I worked steadily, replacing the damaged hardware while keeping the car in my peripheral vision. Behind me, my most vulnerable animals shifted nervously in their pens. "Let me help," Sierra said, appearing at my side with a flashlight. She positioned herself to illuminate my work while keeping her own face in shadow from the road. Together, we moved the goats and younger animals into the most secure enclosure, the one with clear sight lines and multiple exit points. I checked each gate twice, my hands gentle on the metal latches. The patrol car finally pulled away, but minutes later another set of headlights swept the property. This one moved even slower, lingering at each building before moving on. Night settled fully across the farm. Stars emerged above the pasture, but their light was diminished by the harsh beam of a spotlight that suddenly locked onto the barn's main door. The artificial glare held steady, creating sharp shadows and washing out the natural evening darkness. Inside the barn, I stood motionless in the shadows beside my goats. One of the younger ones pressed against my leg, seeking comfort. I placed a steadying hand on its back, my fingers finding the familiar curl of its wool. The spotlight remained fixed, a silent reminder that they were watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. Through the barn side window, I could see Marlene's porch light still burning, her silhouette moving behind curtains as she continued documenting everything. In the farmhouse, Sierra's borrowed flashlight bobbed as she photographed the property line with a disposable camera. Small acts of resistance, building evidence piece by piece. The spotlight held its position, unwavering, turning the barn door into a bright stage where every movement would be observed and judged. I remained in the shadows, one hand still resting on my goat, measuring my breaths like I'd been trained to do in another life long ago. The kitchen clock ticked past 9 as I sat at my scarred wooden table, a lined notebook opened before me. My handwriting was precise, almost mechanical, as I documented every detail of the day's raid, badge numbers, the exact words Calder and Landry had used. Through the window I could see the dark shape of a patrol car, engine running but lights off, a predator waiting in the shadows. My farm receipts lay in neat stacks beside me, years of careful record-keeping that proved every animal and piece of equipment was legally mine. The deputies had not even glanced at them during the raid. They had not wanted proof of innocence. I reached for Marlene's borrowed landline phone, dialing the county sheriff's office with steady fingers. The line rang 6 times before kicking to voicemail. I spoke clearly and professionally. "This is Harlan Voss. I'm requesting copies of today's search authorization and all body cam footage from the officers present during the raid on my property." I left my number, knowing they already had it. Next, I called Martin and Associates, a local law firm. A receptionist answered on the second ring. "I need to speak with an attorney about a civil rights violation," I said. The pause was heavy. "I'm sorry, Mr. Voss, but we have existing contracts with the county. It would be a conflict of interest." Her voice dropped. "Try someone out of district." 3 more law firms gave similar responses. Each rejection was polite, professional, and absolute. In Marlene's kitchen next door, Sierra cradled the landline phone between ear and shoulder while scribbling notes. "Yes, I understand it is a small-town story," she said to the regional news desk, frustration edging her voice. "But we have documentation of systematic—" She stopped listening. "No, I do not have video right now. They confiscated my phone." Another pause. "Hello?" The line had gone dead. Outside, gravel crunched under heavy tires. 2 deputies had returned, their patrol car creeping along the fence line. The spotlight stayed off, but their presence was deliberate, a reminder that darkness would not protect me. Metal rattled as they shook my gate chain, followed by muffled laughter. They were trying to provoke me, hoping I would storm out angry and give them an excuse. I remained at my table, keeping my hands visible through the window. The cheap digital camera Marlene had lent me sat ready beside my notebook. It was not high quality, but it could capture timestamps and license plates, evidence that could not be erased as easily as a phone. I documented each patrol car pass, each rattle of the gate, each moment they lingered too long near my animals. The notebook pages filled with times, descriptions, vehicle numbers. My writing never changed pace or pressure, no matter what happened outside. At 11:15, headlights swept across my yard again. This time, it was a county maintenance truck moving slow past the milk house. I watched from the darkened kitchen, my body still, letting them think I had finally gone to sleep. The truck's license plate was partly obscured by mud, but I photographed it anyway, along with the time display on my kitchen clock. The truck idled for 3 minutes near my equipment shed before moving on. I wrote down the exact duration in my notebook, adding it to the growing pattern of intimidation. Midnight came and went. The patrol cars had settled into a rhythm, passing every 45 minutes like clockwork. Each time I documented their presence without confronting them. Let them waste fuel. Let them think I was wearing down. I used the quiet moments between patrols to check my animals. The goats huddled together in their secure pen, eyes gleaming in my flashlight beam. I counted heads, making sure none had been spooked into hurting themselves. Their soft bleats of recognition helped steady my breathing. Near 1 in the morning, I was adding fresh water to the troughs when I heard it, a soft, metallic sound from the barn side door. It was subtle, almost lost under the night insects, but my trained ears caught the distinct click of metal on metal. Someone testing the lock. I stood motionless in the darkness, my body relaxed but alert. The sound did not repeat. There was no scrape of forced entry, no footsteps walking away, just silence, heavy with purpose. I kept my flashlight off, letting my eyes adjust fully to the dark. The patrol car was gone from the road, but that meant nothing. They had shown all day how they operated, always in pairs or groups, one visible while others moved unseen. The barn's main door remained secure, its new lock gleaming dully in the starlight. But the side entrance had older hardware, more vulnerable points. The click had come from there, deliberate enough to be heard like a message. "We can reach your animals any time." I stayed still, controlling my breathing the way I had learned years ago when much more lethal threats had tested my patience. My fingers curled slowly around the camera, ready to document whatever came next. Morning sunlight streamed through the feed store's dusty windows as I pushed my cart down the familiar aisles. The wooden floors creaked beneath my work boots, and the air smelled of sweet grain and leather. I had made this same supply run hundreds of times, but today felt different. Eyes followed me with new wariness. Mrs. Henderson, who usually chatted about her chickens, suddenly needed something from the back room when I approached. Tom Wilson, whose farm bordered mine to the north, became intensely interested in comparing feed prices on a shelf. The message was clear. Association had become dangerous. I kept my movements slow and deliberate as I loaded my cart with necessities, grain for the goats, mineral blocks, basic medical supplies. I'd just picked up a heavy bag of feed when I heard the bell above the door jingle. Deputy Jax Landry swaggered in wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym-built muscles. His badge was not visible, but his gun rode prominent on his hip. His eyes locked onto me immediately, lips curling into a predator's smile. "Well, look who it is," he called out, voice pitched to Carrie. "The big man himself." He walked with exaggerated casualness toward my aisle, positioning himself to block the path. "Surprised you were still buying supplies? Seems like a waste of money considering." I kept my face neutral, focused on reading the feed ingredients list I already knew by heart. The other customers in the store shifted uncomfortably, finding reasons to drift toward the exits. "You know what I cannot figure out?" Landry stepped closer, invading my space. "How folks like you think you can just set up shop wherever you want. This is not exactly your kind of place, is it?" The paper feed bag crinkled slightly in my grip, but my voice stayed level. "Excuse me, Deputy. I need to get by." "Oh, now it is Deputy." Landry's voice dripped mock politeness. "Real respectful. You should be grateful we let you stay out here at all." He rocked forward, shoulder connecting hard with my arm. The heavy bag of feed slipped, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Grain spilled across worn floorboards, creating a small golden pool at our feet. The few remaining customers suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Old Mr. Peters, who had bought hay from me for 3 seasons, turned his back completely and became absorbed in examining garden tools. The store owner, visible through his office window, quickly picked up his phone and began an animated conversation with no one. I knelt slowly, my knees protesting against the hard floor. One handful at a time, I began gathering the spilled grain into a neat pile. Each movement was measured and unhurried, though my jaw muscles tightened almost imperceptibly. Landry loomed over me, boots inches from my fingers. "Look at you, right where you belong," Down there cleaning up your mess. He chuckled, shifting his weight to kick a few kernels further away. Better get used to it. Animal Control's making a special trip out today. Guess they heard about your management issues. I continued collecting grain, my breathing controlled and steady. I'd seen this tactic before, in training, in combat zones, in places where bullies with power tried to provoke reactions they could punish. My fingers moved methodically through their work, refusing to give Landry the satisfaction of rushing or showing anger. Nothing to say, he pressed, clearly frustrated by my calm. That is smart, real smart. Keep your head down, stay quiet. Maybe we will keep letting you play farmer for a while longer. I stood slowly, my task finished. The gathered grain made a small, neat mound in my cupped hands. My voice when it came was soft but clear. I need to pay for this, deputy. Landry's face darkened at the continued lack of reaction, but he stepped aside with exaggerated ceremony. Do not let me stop you, public servant. That is me, here to help. His hand brushed his holstered gun, casual and deliberate. I walked to the counter, paid for my damaged supplies and what I could still carry, and headed for the door. My steps were neither rushed nor hesitant, just steady, like always. Outside, the morning had grown hot and sticky. Sierra's dusty sedan sat in the far corner of the parking lot, half hidden behind a feed delivery truck. She slipped out and hurried to meet me, her reporter's notebook clutched tight. I saw everything, she said quietly, falling into step beside me. I've been tracking their movements since dawn. They are coordinating, Harlan. The intimidation, the animal control threats, it is all planned. She pulled out her phone, swiping to a blurry image. It showed the timestamp from her live stream the day before, frozen at the exact moment it died. In the background, barely visible, a county maintenance truck's lights had just flickered on. See the time? She pointed. Signal died exactly when they powered up. That is not coincidence. They have got equipment to jam phones, probably the same stuff they use for drug raids. They are playing a bigger game than just harassment. I studied the image without comment, my face revealing nothing, but my hands, still dusted with spilled grain, had finally begun to tremble slightly, not from fear but from the effort of maintaining such rigid control. My truck tires crunched on gravel as I turned into my driveway. My heart sank at the sight before me, a white animal control truck and 2 patrol cars already parked in my yard, doors open like hungry mouths. The morning sun made their official markings gleam with false authority. Sheriff Vance Calder stood near the barn entrance, hands on his belt, wearing the same practiced smile he had shown yesterday. Deputy Jax Landry paced by the goat pen, tapping a steel baton against his leg. 2 animal control handlers in khaki uniforms wrestled with portable livestock gates, creating a makeshift chute toward their truck's loading ramp. I parked deliberately, taking my time to shut off the engine and collect my thoughts. The spilled grain from the feed store still dusted my jeans, a reminder of the morning's humiliation. I stepped out, keeping my movements slow and visible. Mr. Voss, Calder called out, waving a single sheet of paper. Emergency livestock seizure for their safety and the public good. I need to see that paperwork, I said, voice steady despite the fury building in my chest. I had spent years learning to control that anger, to channel it into precision rather than explosion. Calder thrust the page forward like it was a shield. The text was sparse, full of vague legal language about reasonable concern and temporary protective custody. No specific violations listed. No judge's signature, just a county letterhead and Calder's scrolled name. A door slammed across the road. Marlene Hayes stood on her porch, arm raised. Her security camera's red light blinked steadily, its lens aimed directly at my yard. 11:17 a.m., she called out clearly. 4 vehicles present, no proper warrant shown. Sierra appeared from behind Marlene's hedge, clutching what looked like a borrowed flip phone. She started recording, her journalist instincts overriding any fear of retaliation. The animal control handlers struggled with my goats, trying to force them up the truck ramp. The animals resisted, sensing the handlers' impatience. One of the men grabbed a young doe by her collar, yanking hard. Careful, I warned, taking a step forward. They are dairy goats, not cattle. You will hurt them. The handler cursed and kicked the doe's hindquarters. The animal's legs buckled and she collapsed with a terrible bleat that cut through me like a blade. The other goats scattered, bleeding in panic. Something shifted in my stance, subtle, almost invisible. My hands remained open at my sides, but my weight settled differently, more centered. "Stop," I said, voice pitched low and calm. "You are hurting them. Let me help move them properly." "He is resisting," Landry shouted, already moving. "Take him down!" Two deputies rushed forward, eager to please their superior. The first grabbed for my arm, expecting the easy takedown they had managed yesterday. Instead, his hand met empty air as I shifted slightly left, not retreating, just redirecting the deputy's momentum. The second deputy lunged, and I caught his wrist in a practiced grip, stepping through the space between them. What happened next looked almost gentle, like a dance move executed perfectly. The deputy's own forward motion carried him over my planted leg. He landed on the grass with a soft thud, expertly guided to avoid head injury. The first deputy stumbled off balance and found himself sitting down hard, unsure how he got there. The remaining officers froze. The animal control handlers backed away from the goat pen. The morning air grew thick with tension. I had not thrown a single punch. I had not raised my voice or made any aggressive moves. But the way I stood now, balanced, ready, completely in control, told a story that made Calder take 3 quick steps backward. "Do not move!" Calder's hand dropped to his holster, his face flushed with anger and something else. Fear. This was not how it was supposed to go. The big, quiet farmer was supposed to break down, give them an excuse. Instead, they had found something else entirely. "He is trained!" Calder shouted, pointing at me like he had discovered a dangerous animal. "He is dangerous!" New sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each second. I remained perfectly still, hands still open, while my goats huddled behind me in their pen. The injured doe struggled to her feet, limping toward the familiar safety of my presence. Marlene's voice rang out again. 11:23 a.m. Excessive force attempted against unarmed landowner. Owner showed legal restraint in self-defense. Sierra's borrowed phone stayed steady, capturing every moment. The morning sun cast long shadows across the yard, turning the scene into sharp contrasts. The bright white of the animal control truck against the dark barn wood, the glint of badges against uniform blue. And me, solid and unmovable, standing between my animals and those who meant them harm. The approaching sirens grew louder, their pitch rising with urgency. The afternoon sun beat down on my farmyard, now quieter, but still tense. I stood in the barn doorway, one hand pressed against the weathered wood to steady myself. The morning's confrontation had left me vibrating with contained energy, not fear exactly, but the familiar post-adrenaline shake I had not felt since my service days. Across the yard, Sheriff Vance Calder huddled with his deputies near their patrol cars, phones out, voices low. The animal control truck remained parked at an awkward angle, its empty loading ramp still extended like an accusation. The handlers kept their distance now, stealing uncertain glances at me between pretending to review paperwork. "You okay?" Marlene called from her position by the fence. She had not budged since the attempted seizure, her camera still recording. I managed a short nod, focusing on my breathing the way I had been trained. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow the heart rate. Stay present. A gleaming black SUV with tinted windows turned into the drive, tires crushing gravel with expensive precision. The vehicle looked startlingly clean against the dusty farm equipment and working trucks. It stopped in a calculated spot, close enough to seem friendly, far enough to maintain an escape route. Pure tactical thinking, though I doubted the driver knew he was broadcasting such clear intentions. The man who stepped out moved like someone who practiced his walk in mirrors. Early 40s, tailored casual wear that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill. His smile was bright enough to sell toothpaste, but his eyes remained flat and assessing. "Mr. Voss," he called out, approaching with measured steps, "I am Bryce Kane. I heard about this morning's unfortunate situation." He held up a bottle of water like a peace offering. "Thought you might need this. It has been quite a day." I did not move to take it. I'd seen this type before, the friendly face of unfriendly intentions. Kane did not seem bothered by the rejection, smoothly setting the bottle on a nearby fence post instead. "I represent certain development interests in the county," he continued, maintaining his careful distance. "We have been watching the area's potential. I think I might have a solution that works for everyone." He pulled a leather folder from his SUV and approached my workbench, laying it out with deliberate casualness. Simple, clean purchase offer, fair market value considering current conditions. He slid the folder forward, manicured fingers spreading documents like playing cards. I glanced at the number and felt my jaw tighten. The offer was barely half what the land was worth, even without counting improvements in equipment. "That is robbery," Marlene snapped from her position. "I have seen your name on those transfer records, Mr. Kane. Always buying after mysterious violations force people out." Kane's smile did not waver, but something hardened behind his eyes. "Mrs. Hayes, is it? Always looking out for your neighbors? Admirable." The words dripped with false sweetness. "But this is a private business discussion." Sierra had edged closer, her borrowed phone capturing the scene. Kane did not acknowledge her directly, but his body shifted slightly to block the folder's contents from her view. "Mr. Voss," he said, voice dropping to a concerned murmur, "I understand your background makes certain situations complicated. The county could frame things very unfortunately if this continues. Legal fees alone could bankrupt you before truth matters." He tapped the papers. "This is a lifeline. A clean exit before things get messy." The threat was wrapped in silk, but I heard it clearly. My past service, still technically classified, could be twisted into something sinister. They would paint me as dangerous, unstable, a threat to public safety. The morning's self-defense would become evidence against me. "Not interested," I said, keeping my voice level. "Sleep on it," Kane suggested, though his smile had developed a sharp edge. "Things can get very expensive very quickly in this county. Ask anyone who has tried fighting the system. Fines, inspections, permits suddenly requiring review." He straightened his already straight jacket. "The smart play is taking a fair offer while it's available." Sierra's phone clicked rapidly, capturing Kane's license plate as he walked back to his SUV. The vehicle backed out with the same precision it had entered, leaving only dust and tension in its wake. I moved to check my animals, needing their solid presence to stay grounded. The injured doe had found her feet, though she still favored one leg. I ran gentle hands over her, checking for deeper damage, letting her familiar goat smell center me. A glint of metal caught my eye. My storage shed, set back from the barn, showed fresh scuff marks around the lock, pale wood exposed where dark paint had been scraped away. Someone had opened it while I had been distracted by Kane's performance. My stomach tightened as I remembered the letter about my service record still hidden inside. Marlene approached slowly, her camera finally lowered. "I've got it all," she said quietly. "Every word, every threat. That man has been buying up seized properties through shell companies for months." I nodded, still staring at the shed's damaged lock. The afternoon suddenly felt colder, despite the sun's heat. They were not just trying to push me out. They were building a case to bury me. The evening sun cast long shadows across Marlene's front porch as I parked my truck. Through her window, warm kitchen light spilled onto weathered boards, a beacon of safety in the growing dark. I checked my surroundings before walking up, habits from my past life rising to the surface like muscle memory. Inside, Marlene's kitchen smelled of coffee and fresh cornbread. She had set up a makeshift command center on her dining table, laptop, folders, and a small printer she had dragged out of storage. Sierra sat hunched over her borrowed phone, frustration clear on her face. "They are blocking everything," she said without looking up. "My main account locked for suspicious activity. Backup channel got flagged for harassment when I tried posting about the raid." Her fingers flew across the screen, trying another angle. "Even private messages are failing to send." I settled into a kitchen chair that creaked under my weight. "How are they doing it so fast?" "Someone is watching my accounts," Sierra said, and she stopped, her face flushing with anger and embarrassment. "They are spreading stuff about me online, old stuff." Marlene leaned over Sierra's shoulder, squinting at the screen. "What kind of stuff?" "I got caught shoplifting when I was 16, Sierra admitted. "Stupid teenage mistake. Judge sealed the record because I was a minor, but somehow they found it. They are calling me a criminal, saying I cannot be trusted." She set the phone down hard. "They are trying to destroy my credibility before I can even report anything." I pulled out my own phone, opening my banking app. "Let me see what I can do about getting us some legal help." I logged in, then frowned. A red banner flashed across the screen. Account access limited under review. Well, that is not good. They are moving fast, Marlene said, pulling papers from her oldest folder. Faster than usual. Normally they stretch these things out over weeks, but you, she shook her head. They want you gone yesterday. My phone buzzed with an email. Insurance company, I said after reading it. Due to increased risk factors and pending investigation, your farm policy is terminated effective immediately. They are cutting off every angle. But we have got something they do not know about, Marlene said, spreading documents across the table. I have been tracking this pattern since the Williams farm went under last year. Every seizure, every code violation, every anonymous tip that led to a raid. She pointed to highlighted dates, property transfers, shell company names. Bryce Kane's fingerprints are all over it, once you know where to look. Sierra leaned forward, reporter instincts engaged despite her personal troubles. You can prove the connection better. Marlene pulled out a hand-drawn map marked with colored pins. I can show the pattern. See these red pins? Properties seized in the last 18 months. Blue pins are pending violations. Green shows where Kane's shell companies bought in after foreclosure. She traced a line with her finger. They are building a corridor. Your farm, Harlan. It is the missing piece they need. I studied the map. Recognition clicking. The survey stakes. They were already acting like they owned it. We need to document everything tonight, Sierra said. Property lines, existing locks, anything they might try to change. In the morning, we hit the courthouse for official records and file formal complaints with every office that might listen. Use my old camera, Marlene said, pulling a digital camera from a drawer. They cannot hack or block physical photos like they can phones. I have got fresh batteries. Headlights swept across her front windows, bright beams moving with deliberate slowness. We all froze, watching the light track across Marlene's flowered curtains. The vehicle did not pass. It lingered, engine idling. I moved to the window, staying behind the curtain's edge. A county patrol car sat at the curb. Spotlight aimed at Marlene's house. The message was clear. We see you. They are watching every move, I said quietly. Let them watch, Marlene replied, but her voice wavered slightly. I have got copies of everything in 3 different places. If anything happens to my house, the whole file goes public. The patrol car finally moved on, but the tension remained. We spent the next hour planning our moves, speaking in low voices despite being inside. Marlene copied more documents. Sierra tried backdoor methods to post updates. I made lists of what needed photographing and measuring. When full dark settled, I knew I had to check my farm. I drove home slowly, watching for followers, noting every vehicle I passed. My property stood quiet in the darkness. But something felt wrong. I walked the familiar path to my storage shed, flashlight beam picking out details. The lock on my shed door gleamed too brightly, brand new silver against the old wood. Not my lock, not my key. Someone had been there while I was gone, replacing my security with their own. I touched the foreign metal, cold against my fingers, and understood the message. Nothing here is truly yours anymore. The night pressed in around me, full of watching eyes and waiting threats. My past was locked behind that door, and now I could not reach it. They were building their trap piece by piece, turning my own space against me. The beam of my flashlight traced across the new lock, catching fresh scratches in the metal where someone had worked quickly. I held Marlene's digital camera steady, documenting every mark and scrape around the door frame. The night air felt heavy with moisture and tension. From her front porch across the road, Marlene's silhouette remained visible, a stubborn guardian keeping watch. Sierra's car idled quietly in the shadow of an old oak tree, her borrowed phone ready to record. Neither woman would leave me alone tonight. We all knew what was coming. My hands moved with deliberate care as I photographed the lock from multiple angles. The scratches told a story. Whoever changed it had been rushed, probably watching over their shoulder. I noted how the hasty installation had gouged the wood around the hasp. The lock itself was heavy-duty, expensive, not something grabbed from a hardware store shelf. This was planned. My flashlight beam caught something else, small metal shavings on the ground beneath the door. Fresh ones. I crouched to examine them but did not touch. More evidence of their hurried work. The camera clicked softly as I documented each detail. Got movement at the main road? Sierra called out quietly from her car. I straightened up slowly, muscles tight with anticipation. Patrol lights bloomed in the darkness, painting the trees in rotating blue and red. 2 county vehicles rolled through my gate like they owned it. The lead car's spotlight snapped on, harsh white light flooding the area around the shed. Sheriff Vance Calder stepped out first, adjusting his gun belt with theatrical care. Deputy Jax Landry emerged from the passenger side, already sneering. Their confidence radiated like heat. They had been waiting for this moment. "Evening, Mr. Voss," Calder called out, voice pitched to Carrie. "Got ourselves another tip. We need to check out weapons this time. Cannot ignore that kind of public safety concern, especially not with your background," Landry added, hand resting on his holster. I kept my voice steady. "You changed my lock." "Now why would we do that?" Calder's smile was razor thin. "Maybe you did it yourself, trying to hide something. Need to see inside that shed, Mr. Voss. Officer safety." "Not without a warrant." Landry moved forward, boots crunching on gravel. "Could be an emergency situation. Public risk." He reached for the lock. "Do not need a warrant if we have got probable cause." "Do not touch it," I said quietly. "You know that is not legal." "Legal?" Landry laughed, ugly and sharp. "Way I see it, you are interfering with a police investigation again." He grabbed the lock, yanking hard. "What are you hiding in there, big man?" More patrol cars appeared at the gate. Calder had planned this crowd scene carefully. He pulled papers from his jacket, crisp like they had been waiting in an envelope. "Actually, we do have authorization right here. Signed this evening by Judge Eleanor Hart herself." I recognized the name. The same judge who had rubber-stamped their previous raids. The paper looked pristine, not like something drafted in an emergency. "Everyone stay back," Calder announced loudly as neighbors began peeking out their windows. "Potential weapon situation here." Sierra's car door opened. She stepped out filming, trying to catch the deputies' faces. "Sheriff, can you explain why you were searching private property at nearly 11 at night?" A deputy moved fast, snatching her phone. "Evidence in an ongoing investigation." "Evidence of what?" Sierra demanded. "Your illegal search." Calder raised his voice, playing to his audience of worried neighbors. "Folks, please stay in your homes. We are conducting an emergency public safety inspection based on credible intelligence about dangerous materials." More units arrived, lights flashing. The scene grew carnival bright. Landry produced bolt cutters and approached the shed door with obvious satisfaction. "Do not," I said. "You know what you put in there." "Resisting again?" Landry stepped closer. "Hands behind your back. Now." I could have dropped 3 of them before they touched me. The knowledge sat in my muscles like electricity, but that is what they wanted. An excuse. I kept my hands visible and did not move. Calder addressed the growing crowd of onlookers. "This is why we need these inspections, folks. Cannot have unstable elements in our community. Cannot have people thinking they are above the law." 2 deputies grabbed my arms, wrenching them back hard enough to hurt. The handcuffs bit into my wrists as Landry tightened them with unnecessary force. They walked me to the patrol car, making sure everyone saw. "Your farm will be a lot safer under county management," Landry whispered, shoving my head down into the back seat. Through the window I watched Calder orchestrate his show. Deputies positioned their vehicles to control viewing angles. The bolt cutters snapped through my lock. The shed door creaked open. Marlene stood on her porch, still filming. Sierra argued with the deputy holding her phone. Neighbors whispered behind their screens and curtains. The stage was set perfectly. At 11:47 p.m., Calder leaned down to the patrol car window, close enough that I could smell his aftershave. His voice dripped with satisfaction. "By sunrise, nobody will believe you." The dashboard clock blinked 12:01 a.m. as Marlene's ancient Volvo idled in the county jail parking lot, steam rising from 2 untouched gas station coffees. Under the harsh lot lights, Sierra's hands trembled as she spread photos across the dashboard, my careful documentation of the survey stakes, the scratched shed door, the suspicious county vehicles. Marlene pulled out a thick manila folder, her neat handwriting covering every tab. 17 similar raids in 14 months, she said, voice tight with controlled anger. Every single one ended in seized property or forced sales, and all that land went to shell companies. Sierra opened her backup laptop, an old model she kept in her car trunk for emergencies. Every acre, Marlene's finger traced a property map. Different company names, but the same patterns, the same timing, the same buyers showing up after the sheriff's office clears the way. Sierra plugged in a mobile hotspot, not trusting any local networks tonight. They will try to shut this down fast once we start uploading. Then we do not give them time. Marlene pulled out her phone, already dialing a number she had written on her palm. Civil rights hotline first, everything on record. The laptop hummed to life. Sierra created an encrypted folder, hands steadier now with purpose. She started with the timeline, photographs time-stamped from dawn to midnight, showing the progression from mysterious survey stakes to the manufactured crisis at the shed. Each image told part of the story: the illegal raid, the signal jamming, the planted evidence, the escalating intimidation. "This is Marlene Hayes." Marlene spoke clearly into her phone, calling from Riverside County to report ongoing civil rights violations and property theft conspiracy. She gave her address, phone number, and began naming names: Sheriff Vance Calder, Deputy Jax Landry, Developer Bryce Kane. Her voice never wavered. Sierra's fingers flew across the keyboard, building redundancies. She set up timed releases to multiple news outlets, civil rights organizations, and state oversight boards. If anyone disabled her account or arrested her, the files would blast out automatically. They cannot stop all the channels at once. Red and blue lights swept the parking lot as another patrol car cruised past, slow and deliberate. Both women kept working. They had nothing left to lose by being seen. "Got everything documented about the signal jamming during raids?" Marlene asked, hanging up after leaving her detailed message. Screenshots of the connection drops, timestamps of when their county truck powered up that equipment. Sierra pointed to a graph showing the pattern. It is not subtle once you see it laid out. At 1:45 a.m., Marlene's phone lit up with a text. She checked it, shoulders straightening. "Vivian Locke is coming. My contact at Legal Aid got through to her, the civil rights attorney." Sierra looked up from her screen. "The one who broke open that police corruption case last year. She was already watching this county. Said she needed one solid case to move on." Marlene's eyes were fierce in the dim light. "Well, she has got one now." They kept working as they waited. Sierra finished uploading the last batch of photos, including shots of Bryce Kane's development plans that exposed how the seized properties created a perfect footprint for his project. Marlene organized her property records chronologically, showing how each emergency inspection led to land transfers within weeks. At 2:00 a.m., sharp headlights cut through the darkness. A battered blue pickup truck pulled in beside them, its engine ticking as it cooled. Attorney Vivian Locke stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. She wore jeans and a blazer like she had dressed in a hurry, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "Show me everything," she said without preamble. "Start with the pattern." For the next hour, we laid out the evidence across the hood of Marlene's car. Vivian asked precise questions, took rapid notes, and studied each document with practiced attention. Her expression grew harder as the full scope became clear. Finally, she looked up. "This is a conspiracy," she said, voice cutting through the night air. "Now we prove it." She pulled out her phone, sending rapid texts to her legal team. "We file emergency motions now. I want a hearing at first light before they can clean this up." Her fingers flew across the screen. "We hit them with civil rights violations, evidence tampering, misuse of emergency powers, conspiracy to deprive rights under color of law, the whole framework." Sierra shifted uneasily. "They will try to bury it. They always do." "That is why we go nuclear." Vivian's smile was sharp. "Every motion gets filed simultaneously. Every piece of evidence gets logged officially. We force them to explain themselves on record." Inside the jail, I sat alone in my cell, listening to the echoes of deputies laughing down the hallway. The concrete bench was cold beneath me. I kept my breathing steady like I had learned long ago, controlling what I could, conserving energy for what mattered. At exactly 3:15 a.m., Vivian Locke submitted the last emergency motion through the court's electronic filing system. The timestamp blinked on her screen, proof that the machinery of justice had begun turning slowly but irreversibly. Outside my cell, the deputies' laughter continued, unaware that their comfortable world of impunity was about to shatter. The fluorescent lights of courtroom B hummed overhead as I stood beside attorney Vivian Locke at exactly 8:00 a.m. My orange jumpsuit had been replaced with my wrinkled clothes from yesterday. still carrying the smell of hay and dirt from the raid. In the back row, Marlene Hayes gripped her folder of documents while Sierra balanced a borrowed notepad on her knee. Judge Eleanor Hart studied the emergency motions through reading glasses, her expression growing darker with each page. Sheriff Vance Calder lounged in his chair at the prosecution table, radiating easy confidence until Vivian stepped forward. "Your Honor," Vivian began, her voice filling the quiet courtroom. "The probable cause in this case is not just flawed, it is manufactured." She held up a timeline. The anonymous tip about weapons arrived precisely 7 minutes after my client's shedlock was replaced without his knowledge or consent. Not before. After. The judge leaned forward. "Explain the lock replacement." "Mr. Voss documented the original lock at 6 p.m. Vivian projected photographs onto the courtroom screen. At 9:47 p.m., security footage from a neighbor's camera shows county vehicles at the property. At 10:15 p.m., the lock was different. At 10:22 p.m., the sheriff's office suddenly received an anonymous tip about weapons." Calder shifted in his chair. The county prosecutor whispered urgently in his ear. "Furthermore," Vivian continued, "there is no proper warrant trail. The initial raid was conducted under an emergency authorization that does not exist in county code. The livestock seizure notice lacks required signatures. The property inspection paperwork shows impossible timestamps. Deputies claiming to be at 2 locations simultaneously." She laid out more photographs. "The survey stakes inside Mr. Voss's property line, the damaged barn door, the suspicious county truck during Sierra's live stream disruption. This is not law enforcement, Your Honor. This is coordinated harassment designed to force my client off his land." Judge Hart removed her glasses. "Sheriff Calder, would you care to explain these discrepancies?" Calder stood, adjusting his belt. "Your Honor, we are dealing with a trained combat veteran who has demonstrated aggressive tendencies. These technical complaints about paperwork do not change the threat he poses." "That is not what I asked," Judge Hart cut him off. "I asked about the warrant discrepancies and the suspicious timing. Would you like to try again?" The silence stretched. Calder's smile slipped slightly. "Bond is granted," Judge Hart announced with conditions. "Mr. Voss will avoid direct contact with sheriff's deputies except through counsel. He will remain within county limits and continue normal farming operations." She fixed Calder with a stern look. "And the sheriff's office will cease all surveillance and property inspections without proper warrants, real ones, properly filed." Outside, the courthouse television cameras clustered around Calder on the steps. He played to them expertly, his voice carrying across the plaza. "Folks, we are dealing with a highly trained individual here. Combat experience, special operations background. Now he is displaying volatile behavior right here in our community." "He is poisoning the jury pool," Vivian muttered, guiding me toward her car. "But let him talk. Every word is actionable." We followed my truck back to the farm, Vivian documenting with her dash camera. The property looked wrong, even from the gate, too still, too quiet. The barn door hung crooked on its track, dented inward like something had struck it repeatedly. A pen latch was twisted and broken. "Wait here," Vivian said, already filming. "Let me document everything before you touch it." I moved slowly through my farm, cataloging each violation. The goat pen was empty. Chicken feed was scattered and trampled. A faint smear of red marked one railing. Not much blood, but enough to spike cold fear in my chest. My animals were not just missing. They had been handled roughly. A patrol car appeared at the end of the lane, rolling up like it belonged there. Deputy Jax Landry stepped out, hand resting casually on his belt. His boots crunched on gravel as he approached. "Heard they let you out," Landry called. "Guess that fancy lawyer helped. But you are still going down, boy. Matter of time." I kept my voice steady. "You need to leave my property." "Or what? You gonna show everyone that combat training?" Landry stepped closer. "Come on, big man. Show us what you really are." "I'm a farmer," I said. "Nothing more." "Lying sack of—" Landry lunged forward, grabbing my shirt with both hands. What happened next was smooth, controlled, and over in seconds. I turned into the grab, redirecting Landry's momentum. One precise movement stripped the deputy's grip. Another shift of weight put Landry off balance. I pinned him briefly against the fence, not striking, just controlling, then stepped back with open hands. From the road, Sierra's camera captured everything: Landry's aggression, my restraint, the clean defensive sequence that looked almost gentle in its efficiency. Landry stumbled upright, face flushed with humiliation. His hand twitched toward his weapon, then stopped as he remembered the cameras. With a final curse, he stormed back to his patrol car. Vivian lowered her own phone, where she had recorded every second. "Good," she said quietly. "Now we have their aggression on video." The afternoon sun slanted through my kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden table where attorney Vivian Locke spread out fresh legal papers. It was 4:00 p.m., and the air still held the weight of the morning's confrontation with Deputy Landry. Marlene Hayes arranged her documents with precise hands, while Sierra set up a borrowed laptop, her own equipment still in police custody. "Write exactly what you saw," Vivian instructed, passing out statement forms. "Nothing more. Time, place, specific words used. If you are not completely certain about a detail, do not include it." My pen moved slowly across the paper as I documented the raid. My handwriting was careful and methodical, the same way I handled everything. I described the survey stakes appearing overnight, the missing body cams, the way Landry had planted evidence near the tool bench. "Remember," Vivian added, "these statements are sworn testimony. No emotions, no speculation, just facts they cannot dispute." Marlene pulled out her timeline of property transfers, cross-referencing dates with her photos of county vehicles. "I've got license plates, timestamps, and recordings from my porch camera showing deputies discussing the raids before they happened." "Perfect," Vivian nodded. "That establishes premeditation." Sierra checked her auto-release system again, making sure the evidence would blast out to multiple sources if anyone interfered with her account. Her hands shook slightly as she typed, but her voice was steady. "I've documented every instance of signal jamming during raids. The pattern is clear. They are using county equipment to block witnesses." At 5:45 p.m., Vivian's phone buzzed. She read the message and allowed herself a small smile. "The State Investigation Unit accepted our packet. They are coordinating with federal civil rights contacts." She looked at each of us in turn. This just became bigger than Calder's jurisdiction. 15 minutes later, Sierra's laptop chimed an alert. Her main social media account had been locked for suspicious activity. Within seconds, her backup system activated, releasing the first wave of evidence to selected journalists and investigators. We watched as the story began spreading, first regionally, then wider. Photos of the planted evidence, videos of deputy intimidation, documents showing the pattern of land seizures. "Calder cannot bury this anymore," Sierra said, tracking the shares and responses. "Too many eyes on it now." At 7:30 p.m., gravel crunched under tires outside. 2 unmarked sedans pulled into the driveway, their government plates visible in the fading light. The group tensed until Vivian checked her phone and nodded. "State investigators." "Let them work." 4 investigators introduced themselves, their badges reflecting the last sunlight. They moved with precise efficiency, photographing everything: the survey stakes with GPS coordinates, the damaged barn door, the broken pen latch, the blood smear on the railing. They paid special attention to the shed, documenting the replaced lock from every angle before carefully removing it as evidence. "Mrs. Hayes," one investigator said, "we understand you have security footage." Marlene led them to her house, returning with a hard drive containing months of recordings. "I never delete anything," she said. "Every suspicious vehicle, every late-night visit, every conversation I could pick up." The investigators' faces remained professional, but their interest sharpened as they reviewed the clips. Deputy conversations about clearing out my farm, Calder's private meetings with Bryce Kane, the systematic pattern of harassment designed to appear legal. "Mr. Voss," an investigator asked, "did you maintain any documentation of the original lock before it was replaced?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied, retrieving my photos and purchase receipts. "I document everything about this farm: maintenance, repairs, visitors, especially since the harassment started." The investigators exchanged glances. One made a phone call, speaking quietly but urgently. By 9:00 p.m., they were packing up their equipment. "We are executing warrants at the sheriff's office tonight," the lead investigator informed us. "Do not discuss this with anyone. If deputies attempt contact, record everything and call us immediately." We watched the unmarked cars disappear down the dark road. The kitchen felt different now, less like a refuge, and more like a command center for something larger than our small town. "Try to rest," Vivian advised, gathering her papers. "Tomorrow will be—" Her phone buzzed with a text. She read it twice, her expression shifting from professional reserve to contained triumph. She turned to me, who had endured so much with such careful control. "They lied under oath," she said simply. "The body cam archive has been located." The words hung in the quiet kitchen. The supposedly missing footage that would show everything, the planted evidence, the signal jamming, the coordinated intimidation, had survived Calder's attempts to bury it. Like Marlene's meticulous records in Sierra's auto-release system, the truth had found its way to light. I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at my darkened farm. Somewhere in the night, my missing animals waited to come home. But for the first time since the survey stakes appeared, the darkness held no threats, only evidence. And evidence, unlike Calder's carefully constructed narrative, did not lie. Morning sun blazed across the courthouse steps as cameras clicked and microphones bobbed above the crowd. At precisely 10 o'clock a.m., I climbed those steps with measured strides, Attorney Vivian Locke at my right shoulder, Marlene Hayes and Sierra flanking us like guards. The message was clear. We moved as one unit now, impossible to isolate or intimidate. Sierra carried a borrowed camera documenting everything. Her own equipment remained in evidence, but that had not stopped her. Local reporters who had ignored her weeks ago now shouted questions. She kept walking, focused on recording this moment properly. Inside the high-ceilinged courtroom, state investigators commanded attention with methodically organized evidence. They started with a simple timeline projected on a screen. Every raid, every anonymous tip, every property seizure that led to Bryce Kane's shell companies acquiring land. "Your Honor," the lead investigator stated, "we have recovered what Sheriff Calder claimed was deleted." She played the first body cam clip. The footage showed deputies removing cameras before entering my property. Their casual conversation made it clear this was standard procedure. Another clip captured Landry placing evidence before discovering it, complete with timestamp and GPS coordinates. Vivian leaned forward, her pen moving steadily as she documented reactions. Several deputies shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Calder maintained his practiced smile, but his fingers drummed against the table, a tell she had noticed during depositions. The investigator continued. "We have also recovered signal jamming logs." She displayed equipment records showing county-owned devices activated during raids, specifically targeting live stream frequencies. This was not random interference. It was coordinated suppression of documentation. The judge's expression hardened as text messages appeared on screen. Deputies joking about clearing Voss out and discussing how to provoke reactions they could use against him. Calder's name appeared repeatedly, directing the operation while maintaining deniability. "Your Honor," Vivian rose, "we move for immediate separation of all involved deputies for questioning. Their coordinated statements show clear collaboration to obstruct justice." The judge agreed without hesitation. Bailiffs began moving deputies to separate rooms. The carefully constructed wall of blue solidarity cracked visibly as each officer faced questioning alone. Outside, justice arrived with the swift efficiency that had been denied for months. State police led Sheriff Vance Calder down the courthouse steps in handcuffs, charging him with civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The same cameras that had recorded his smirking press conferences now captured his attempt to hide his face. Deputy Jax Landry emerged next, no longer in uniform. The department terminated him on the spot when video evidence contradicted his sworn statement about planting evidence. His face twisted with impotent rage as officers took him into custody, his own handcuffing techniques used against him. Bryce Kane tried to slip out a side door but found investigators waiting. They named him in a fraud investigation, detailing how his shell companies acquired properties after manufactured code violations and seizures. His polished corporate demeanor cracked as they listed specific dates and dollar amounts. The county commission held an emergency session, freezing all pending property transfers and halting seizures until a complete audit could be performed. Years of unchecked abuse collapsed in a single morning of receipts and records. Marlene stood on the courthouse steps, watching it all with sharp satisfaction. Her meticulous documentation had helped build this moment. When reporters approached, she spoke clearly. We saw wrong being done. We kept records. We did not back down. By late afternoon, I drove home to find neighbors' trucks parked along my fence line. People who had looked away in the feed store now showed up with tools and lumber, ready to rebuild what harassment had damaged. They worked without fanfare, mending fences, rehanging gates, repairing the barn door that deputies had dented. Someone had rescued my seized animals from a holding facility, returning them safely. My goats crowded the fence, bleating welcome as I checked each one carefully. The small blood smear on the railing was scrubbed clean. Marlene arrived with a settlement check, the first of several promised restitutions. She did not wait for ceremony, just started planning a community legal fund. So the next person they target has resources, she explained, already organizing paperwork. Justice should not depend on whether you can afford to fight back. The sunset painted long shadows across the farm as I lifted a new sign into place. Simple white letters on solid wood declared, Voss Family Farm. Still here. Sierra captured the moment on video, no longer documenting injustice but recording victory instead. Her camera followed my hands as I leveled the sign, caught the last sunlight gleaming on fresh paint. This was not a plea for acceptance or a request for permission to exist. It was a declaration of presence, of roots that went deeper than corruption. Neighbors kept working as darkness approached, stringing temporary lights so they could finish repairs. The farm had become more than one man's property. It was now a symbol of successful resistance against systemic abuse. Every fixed fence and straightened post represented community pushing back against corruption. The air held the scent of fresh-cut lumber and newly turned earth. As I stood in my yard, my phone buzzed with messages from other farmers sharing similar stories, asking for advice, offering support. The isolation that Calder had weaponized against me had transformed into connection. As I stood on my farm that final evening, watching the last rays of sunlight catch the fresh paint on the new sign, Voss Family Farm, still here, I felt something shift deep inside me. What started as survey stakes hammered secretly into my soil became a brutal lesson in how quickly power can try to erase a man's life, his work, and his right to simply exist. They took my animals, broke my locks, planted lies, jammed signals, and whispered that someone like me didn't belong. Yet every time I wanted to explode, every time rage burned hot behind my eyes, I chose control instead. I breathed. I documented. I waited. I let the truth do the fighting, and the truth won. Not because I was the strongest or the loudest, but because I refused to become the monster they needed me to be. I learned that real strength isn't in how hard you can hit back. It's in how steadily you can stand when everything is designed to make you fall. It's in protecting what matters most, your land, your animals, your dignity, without losing your soul in the process. It's in the quiet neighbors who finally stepped forward, in the records one determined woman never stopped keeping, in a young reporter who refused to be silenced. Justice didn't arrive because the system suddenly became fair. It arrived because ordinary people decided silence was no longer an option. And that is the lesson carved into every repaired fence post on my land today. When they come for what's yours, don't give them your character too. Hold your ground, gather your evidence, protect your peace, and trust that truth, given enough stubborn voices, will eventually break through the darkness. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of a time you had to stand when everything pushed you to kneel, drop a comment below and tell me, what's the one thing you refuse to let anyone take from you? Your family, your principles, your dream? Share it. Let's remind each other we're not alone. And if stories of everyday courage, quiet resistance, and hard-won justice speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There are more battles out there, more lessons waiting, and I'll keep telling them as long as you keep showing up. Thank you for being here with me.